Before we get started with this episode, a quick announcement. Last year, we released a remix album on the BlocSonic net label, which featured remixes of our releases by different artists. And this year, we are doing that once again. It is an annual release that we do, a Lorenzo's Remixes EP that we put out on the Creative Commons net label, BlocSonic. And it is in tandem with Net Label Day this July. So right now we are doing another call out for remixers, musicians, and producers for this upcoming remix EP that we are going to be putting out on BlocSonic Records. So if you want to remix one of our songs, get featured on the album, kind of just really be part of this open source Creative Commons net label community, then all you need to do is go to lorenzosmusic.blocksonic.com and you can check out the different songs that you can remix and also download the stems with the notes and the information about the different tracks. And just to note, we would like to have these entries in by the middle of June so we can get them ready for the July release on Net Label Day. So once again, go to lorenzosmusic.blocksonic.com to find out more. Now on to the show. Hi, and welcome to another Lorenzo's Music Podcast. I'm Tom Ray, and this is a show where I like to talk to musicians, people involved with music, people creating things for musicians, just stuff like that, and figure out more about them, learn about them, people I meet on the internet. And today, that is also one of the cases where I'm meeting a musician, but a musician that also does things for musicians. So we will ask him all about that on this show. And why don't we start out by telling the people your name and what it is you do?
Yeah, so I'm Keith Marshall, often known as Keith. I record music as Key13. And I think more pertinent to some of the stuff you want to talk about, I run the Faircamp Webbring. Mm-hmm. I run the infrastructure behind Bonkwave.org. And just recently set up some of the automation behind the new Fair Trade Music Friday site that we launched last week. So
I did not know that, so we are totally going to talk about that.
And a couple of other, I'm sure there's some probably other little bits and pieces that I've done. I do lots of little tweaky things, so I'm sure I've done some other tweaky things.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And first of all, where are you located?
So I'm in Kent in the UK. Okay.
And you go by Keith online, Keef, which your name is Keith, and that's pretty easy to figure out how that came about. Why Key13? What's the reasoning behind the name of your music or band?
So I started out on this particular phase of musical journey in about 2020, in March 2020 actually, and it completely coincidentally around the same time that the COVID lockdown was about to start, but just before. But when I started making music, I didn't know what was going to come out. All I had was my little NanoKey 2 that I bought, and
oh, nice.
My music knowledge that my formative years were the late 70s, early 80s, so I kind of figured, okay, it's going to be some sort of electronic futurist kind of thing, new romantic, new wave. So I thought, okay, 80s, Cold War, let's put some Cold War imagery and build some sort of, slightly brutalist or dark kind of Cold War stuff around it. And the previous year I'd been away to Lithuania and we'd visited a former Soviet nuclear missile silo, which is now open as a museum. You can just go in and
really?
Get a tour around, which is just one of those weird things that you do. So I had some photos. And one of the photos was of the launch key that they would actually have used to fire the missiles. And it was stuck to a panel on the wall, and it had stenciled above it the number 13. And I thought, okay, I'll use that as a logo, and then we've got the name. That's Key13. And you have to say Keith in order to say Key13, so that's good too. So we quite like that. But as time's gone on, I've kind of realised there's a couple of other meanings which I prefer, actually, to that. So, I mean, Keith, the fact that you have to say Keith in order to say it is good. Mm-hmm. But of course, as a musician, you'll know typically there's 12 notes in the Western scale or 12 keys. So the idea that there's a Key13 is a nice pretentious kind of thing that honestly had not occurred to me at the time, but has subsequently come in. So I quite like that idea as well. So, pick one of those.
Right.
options.
I
But
like that
yeah,
you have multiple choice. It's like one of those choose your own adventure books. Which one works for you? So, were you doing music before this all came about, or did you really just start then?
I think I started this phase then. So I'm quite old, probably a bit older than I look, and I started making, I was musical as a child, and always made music sort of through my kind of teenage years and loosely into my early 20s. But then when I started working properly at a career, it just all went by the wayside for a couple of reasons, mostly just not having time, but also I'm a software engineer. I did a lot of typing, and I found that playing keyboards and typing, I was starting to get RSI, and so I just had to stop. So I stopped probably for over 20 years. Didn't touch a keyboard, didn't make any music, nothing.
Hmm.
And then, literally March 2020, I put in an order for the NanoKey, and it all started from there, really. So yeah, I've always been musical, but this particular phase where I've been making and publishing music is really just the last 5 years.
Okay. And you on your different musical sites. I don't know why that came out weird. On your different music sites that you have your music displayed on. Why does that sound so strange? Anyway, I'll get over that. The description that you use is that you use virtual instruments. Now,
Yeah.
is it all derived from the Nano keyboard that you're talking about, or
Yeah. So
okay?
I mean, I've got a couple of other input devices. I don't know how wide your screen goes. You might see that there's a Akai MK whatever it is, MK3 Mini or whatever it is over there, which I use because it has the joystick and some potentiometer, twiddly things. But almost everything I do is on the NanoKey. Yeah, so pretty much everything you hear on the Key13 track will have been played on that at some point. So
Okay.
yeah.
And before you had mentioned that because your informative years were in the 80s and it was going to be kind of a new wave sort of a romantic new wave or whatever you were saying, but is that how you would describe your music, or how would you actually describe your music?
I've given up trying to describe my music, so that was just what I thought was going to happen. It never really did happen that way. I mean, maybe there's one or two tracks. The track I've got called TikTok that probably falls into more in that sort of
Okay.
vein, and a couple
Yeah.
of other ones. Some of the more recent ones, I did one earlier this year called Teardrop on the Cheek of Time, which probably fits into exactly where I thought I was going to be. But oh, I'm all over the place. I mean, I sit down at the keyboard and write something. I never know what's going to come out. It could be
Oh
electronic
yeah.
minimalism. It could be progressive rock. It could be shoegaze. It could be. Yeah, I know. It's not like I plan it. It's like whatever comes out comes out, and
Yeah.
I try and make it sound half decent and probably fail, and that's what goes up on the website. It's that's how it is.
Well, and I guess that gets into another thing too. When I mean, I understand the whole concept of you never know what you're going to. You sit down to do something, never know what you're going to create, or you start out with one thing and end up with something completely different. Totally relate. But how do you? What is your process? Because on a lot of your songs, there are things like guitar, or there's a female singer on some of them. There are, different. So what is your process? Like, give me a process in one that's a completely solo from the ground up, or maybe they're all solo and you're doing something
They're
I
all
don't
completely
understand.
solo. Everything is played on the NanoKey.
Okay. All right. All right.
Literally everything
All
is
right.
played. I'm
So
not kidding.
you're getting that guitar sound from the Nano Key.
Yep.
Explain that to me. I want to know that, because that is one of my biggest complaints, is trying to replicate a guitar. Guitar is one of the few instruments that just I cannot do, and it's because I've known too many guitarists that are really good at it. Playing keyboards and banging on drums, it's something where it's like you can fudge it enough to make it sound like you know exactly what you're doing. But guitar, it's just fumbly, plunk, plunk if you don't know what you're doing. So how are you recreating those guitar sounds? Explain that to me.
I mean, probably mostly with very expensive plugins, but
Okay.
so yeah, I use plugins mostly by a company called Ample Sound,
Hmm.
and they make a whole bunch of guitar plugins. They try and emulate. Well, they're not really emulated; they're sampled from a bunch of classic guitars. So there's a Telecaster, there's a Stratocaster, there's various different sort of heavy metal ones. There's some Gibson ones. They've got a lap steel and various different bass guitars. and they're actually a Chinese company. So they've got a whole bunch of Chinese traditional instruments as well, which is
Really?
quite weird.
Okay.
Which they do. But yeah, they're just really good plugins, and I've got vaguely good at using them and figuring out how to get the most out of them. Some are better than others. Some of the sample sounds I prefer. The one I always tend to go back to, the one you hear the most on my stuff, is the Telecaster. I think that's the one I prefer the sound of. But some of the metal ones I use occasionally. They've got some proper heavy metal. There's a 9-string heavy metal Hellcaster or something. It's quite fun to play with sometimes. You do lots of really long runs and arpeggios and things on. It's good. But
yeah, no, listening to your stuff, I thought for sure you were playing guitar on it. So that's why I wanted to ask you about the virtual instruments thing, because I'm like, how are you going to do virtual instrument with a guitar? That's nuts. What DAW are you doing this in?
Logic Pro.
Okay, you're doing it in Logic. So then this is like a VST, or is it really just a sample bank?
No, it's VST. It's a VST.
Okay, it is
well,
VST.
It's an AU because it's Logic, but yeah, essentially it's a VST. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I got you. And then, okay, so then that would probably be the same case for, like, say, the vocals that you have. So you're not actually singing on any of these?
One or two.
One or two?
But very few. Yeah, mostly they're synthetic and virtual vocalists. Yeah.
That's funny. There's so many questions about your music that I was going to have, and now it's like, oh, now I know what it is. Like, I was also going to ask about the song Heretic, where there is kind of a conversation that sounds like walkie-talkies or an intercom going back and forth. Now, you're saying that that's not a found conversation that you were able to use, but maybe one that was created?
So, Heretic's the most complicated track I've done. It has, I think, about 100 channels on it because of all the different FX patches. So because there's all these FX that's going on, there's the police sirens, there's cars, there's prison doors slamming, there's all kinds of things. But the spoken bits that actually have words that relate to the song are all done using Google text to speech. So they're all different voices that have come out of that and then passed through various different bits of processing to make them sound however I want to sound them in the particular.
Well, in that respect,
that they're in.
Going from Google text to speech, and this is just because I tried it out recently just to see what it was like. Have you ever thought of using first of all, have you ever heard any of the stuff that Google LM can do, and how it can turn documents into podcasts that are two-way conversations between different people?
Yeah, so I have a bit of a line that I draw. So
that's what I was going to ask too. I'm curious.
I like creative things where I'm controlling the output. So with Google text to speech, I write the words, I tell it which voice to use, and I can select from a whole load of voices, and I can tell it what speed to use, and I can mess around and tell it all sorts of different qualities, is it high pitched, low pitched, emphasis, all of those. I've got full control, just as I would with I see it just like a virtual instrument. I've got all of that control. And the same with the vocalists that I use. Yeah. It's the same thing. I've got full control over the notes and the words and the pitch and the volume and the emphasis and all of those sorts of things. It's down to me. I don't like leaving too much to AI creation, and I wouldn't use one of these AI music creators, and I have in the past used some of the AI artwork generators, but the more and more I learn about these things and the more I read about them, the more I'm kind of like, nah, it's not right what they're doing. Yeah. It's not right that what they've trained them on. It's not right, the power implications and the climate implications on a whole. There's just so much wrong going on with those things that I'm going through a process of trying to replace. I've got some really horrible AI generated imagery on a couple of my tracks. I'm trying to get rid of it. Really, really, regret that phase deeply.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, so I don't. There's a line there that I don't cross.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I was curious just because of the text to speech thing, and I have talked with people. I've talked with people on both sides of the using for and against AI stuff. Me, I am impartial. I don't really use it. I try it out just to go, well, what does this thing do? It's kind of one of those things where it's like you still study history just so you don't repeat it, or that you have knowledge of what has happened. So I always do try to keep, I also am into technology and things like that. So I'm always like trying out new things, new services. I always find out later on that I'm totally already signed up for some service that all of a sudden became popular because I tested it out the first second I heard it. But
Well,
yeah, okay,
I'm a software engineer by profession, and so some of these things I actually have to test out and use on a professional
exactly.
basis, and that actually means I find out more about them, and the more I find out about them, the less I like them, generally. So,
Right. What's
because
your forte
it's all about what
is
they're trained on, really, and they get, because they're just hoovering up everybody else's content and reselling it as their own. It's just,
oh yeah,
it's not, it's not great.
I agree with that. Yeah. And what is your, I meant to ask you this before, what is your forte in as far as, or forte, or what is your main language that you work in software wise?
I've been around long enough that like you name one, and I'll tell you whether or not. I mean,
You're
this
right. I asked that the wrong way.
I
I meant,
spent a
what's your
chunk.
favorite?
I don't know. I mean, I use so many. Depends what I'm doing. For little things these days, I use JavaScript or TypeScript or Python.
Okay.
But I spent most of my sizable chunk of my career as a Java programmer. Before that, C, C++,
Oh, wow.
Basic
Okay.
even. I've done Kotlin. I've done C Sharp. I mean, yeah, I kind of I find most of these languages similar enough now that I can just
Right.
pick them up pretty quick. I mean, I wrote my first line of code in the 70s, so I've been writing code for quite a long time. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Damn. Nice. Okay. And then speaking of that now, this kind of leads me into another thing I discovered when I was looking at your stuff. Now, first of all, are you the one that built the image to MIDI site?
So I built the wrapper around it to make it.
Okay.
That was another thing. Yeah, that's true. So I built the wrapper around it that made it a website. So I think it's a building on the shoulders of giants thing. So Yonder, who makes music as Reverb 10,000, they built the tool, which was essentially a little command line Python tool that you could download and run, and that had all the functionality built into it. But obviously, some of the less technical musicians were finding it a bit hard because you have to download all the Python stuff and install the packages and get Python working, and it's not everybody's cup of tea. So all I did was take that code and just wrap it into a web interface so you've got the form, so you can just use it without having to install anything, basically. So I just did that bit. But the original stuff that Yonder wrote is also based on someone else's stuff from before that does the MIDI bit of it, generating the MIDI. So they added just the image processing bit on the top of that. So it's a sort of, if you look, there's a hierarchy of people who've built that. But yeah, Yonder was the one who put that the main bit together.
Yeah, I only just discovered that the other day on your links, and I was trying it out. It's kind of fun to do, and I was able to download it and then just open it up in MuseScore, and it would just play the whole arrangement for me. And I thought that was brilliant. And then choosing the key was really a fun add-on to it, rather than just like upload it. Here is the MIDI that we created. It's like, oh, you can change keys and the scales and all that kind of stuff. So I enjoyed that. That was fun.
Yeah, and because it just outputs MIDI, I mean, if you dump it into Logic, it gives you a whole bunch of standard instruments, but you can just change the VST, so then you've got a big palette to play with to generate something out of it. It's quite fun. There are a couple of tracks that I did with it. It's nice. Good. But, yeah.
Now so we were talking about the way that you create before, and also I wanted to ask, like, is there a huge setup to when you're working on a song, or is it just you can do it right there in front of your desk? I mean, what is your studio setup like?
The machine that you're looking at here,
the thing we're using right now. That's what I was thinking.
This is my tool. This is it. This is literally it. This
it's
Logic
so simplistic
Pro
too.
And a large number of extremely expensive plugins that I've accumulated over the years. But yes.
And it's all just hooked up like through a USB. Like, how is that connecting to even USB, the laptop? I've never used one of those things before.
It's just USB. Just goes straight into the computer.
It's really just a no frills sort of. So that was what you're like, I'm going to get this. And you just essentially built an entire musical project around that. I love that.
I mean, this thing, I mean, I'll be honest with you, Korg have got, I really should praise them, because A, I love this device, but B, when I bought it, it came with this package of stuff, loads of free trials and sort of cut down versions of software tools that you can use. And it was a huge package of stuff. And that's what really got me started, was installing that. So they've got this tool called Gadgets, which I think most people use on an iPad or on a phone, but they've got a Mac version, and I installed the desktop version. This was before I had Logic, actually, when I first got this, and that was what I first started building in. And that's just great because it's got all these built-in virtual instruments, and that got me used to the whole idea of virtual instruments. I've not made music for 20 odd years. Last time I was doing it, I had real keyboards and plugged them into an Atari ST, and you actually had to play stuff and do all that. So I've not had the virtual instrument. So the idea that you could have all these virtual equivalents of, some of the old analog 70s synths just right there in front of you, and you could just pull up the Jean-Michel Jarre patch or something, and it was just right there, without having to worry. That was what got me started, really. And then, there's a whole bunch of things that came with that, like some cut down versions of applied acoustic systems. They do a virtual guitar, which is what first got me into the fact there might be good virtual guitars. I think theirs isn't as good as the Amplsound one, but it's still good.
Okay.
It's good for strumming. It's less good, I think, for picking, but it got me started on that route. And then, that whole package that came with that was the spark for all this, really. Then I outgrew gadgets quite quickly in terms of you can't plug things into it, you can't mix in it. That's when I shifted over to Logic. But other than that, I think that really did get me started.
It's funny, you remind me of a kind of how I got into using graphic design software. Was back when I got my first desktop. I bought a printer for it, and because I wanted to scan the drawings that I was doing, so I got a printer with a scanner. And the scanner came with a promotional CD that had like the most basic version of Corel Draw on it. And I had no idea what this was. And I started I just started playing with it and going, oh, it draws. Didn't even realize it was a vector program. I just thought it was a drawing program. And I'm messing with it and I'm learning it and I'm doing more things. And suddenly I was just like, oh, I understand this. I get what's happening here, and I can bend the lines and I can make the lines do this. And after I draw them, and it was the same sort of thing. Like, it just came with this free software to go like, here, so you have something to print out. And it was the same sort of thing. And then I just sort of sought that out and started getting the actual full programs themselves and then learning about them. And it just kind of all catapulted from there. So very similar. I mean, they know what they're doing when they give you that stuff, and there's a reason behind it because they want you to use it. I then
ended up buying the full versions of quite a lot of those things. So they got some money out of me as a result. But the point was that got me kick-started. And if they hadn't have given me all of that stuff, I'd have been a bit lost because I wouldn't have known, I'd probably had GarageBand on the Mac and I might have played with that a bit. But I don't know that I'd have got as far with that as I would have done with some of these sort of slightly more varied options and gadgets. It's difficult to compare Gadgets and GarageBand, but I think Gadgets probably was the right place for me to start there because it just kick-started a creative process that I clicked. Suddenly, I think within about 2 weeks, I built a track and uploaded it onto SoundCloud, and I thought, that's quite good. The track wasn't good, don't get me wrong, but I thought the fact that I'd been able to create something in that period of time was, was pretty good. So
Fun fact about GarageBand, in one of the very first expansion packs of it, I think it was an expansion pack, like back when GarageBand was first made, my voice was one of the male voices that was on it.
Oh, wow.
But the thing was, they had me go, ooh, and ah, just like do some mouth noises. So I was on it, uncredited.
Yes, don't knock it.
Yeah. Back in I don't even know when the hell that would have been, at least the late 2000s. I don't know. Something like that. Just popped into my head. Now, the shirt you're wearing, I've been meaning to bring this up. You are the second person on the show that has worn this because there's an interview I just did with Xwax, as his online handle is, and he was wearing that too. Now, I recently, because of where I've met both you and Xwax on Mastodon, have learned about a genre that is not a genre, that explains itself as a genre that has no explanation, or maybe it does, or maybe it doesn't, called Bonkwave. Now, you said you maintain the Bonkwave website, and what is it? Explain Bonkwave to me. I do find it fascinating, though, and I think I have an idea.
Let us know. Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't know. We haven't a clue.
You don't know?
Nah.
How did it come about in the first place? Let's put it that way. Bonkwave, while I can understand it's a fun word to say, and when you say it, it's kind of like, even when you say it, you're like, I think I know what it is. And then you go listen and you're like, well, maybe that's what I thought it was. But how did even Bonkwave come about to the point where what the shirt you're wearing is a compilation album that is continually put out for Bonkwave, isn't it?
No, actually, the shirt I was wearing was designed by the person who came up with the concept in the first place, who went by the handle Yoniden on Mastodon.
Okay.
And they were just, I think they'd been in a conversation on another online forum at some point, and just got fed up with people gatekeeping genres. So if you hang around on anything, particularly in the electronic music forums, but I think most music forums, there's a lot of gatekeeping about subgenres. Like, oh no, that's not that particular subgenre. No, it's got to be more like this. Or you say, oh, I think I've just written a track that's this, and they go, no, that's not that. You can't call it that. So I think they'd got a bit fed up, and they just said they would just putting that into a conversation, say, you say something Bonkwave, and then someone comes along and says, no, that's not Bonkwave. And it was a throwaway post on Mastodon. But then, as these things do, within about an hour, another artist called Flair had created like a 30-second or a minute snippet of something, which was they dubbed as Bonkwave. So like, here's a Bonkwave example. And then within about a day, they'd had the idea that, well, we should just invite some artists to create whatever they think Bonkwave is, and we'll put it out on a compilation. And so I think within a month, we had the Volume 1 compilation, which is where Heretic, the track you were talking about earlier, is the one I wrote for that compilation there. And that got put out, all done by Yoniden at that stage. They did the whole lot, compiling, putting it all together, did all the artwork, putting it up all on Bandcamp, all that kind of stuff. And it kind of, very locally within our little Mastodon area, it went a little bit viral. And lots of other people kind of said, oh, it had Volume 1 on the title, and lots of people were saying, oh, is there going to be a Volume 2? Can we do something? So then another couple of months went by, and then there was a Volume 2, and that just turned out to be massive. It's ended up with 2 discs. I think it's about 30 tracks on it, 25, 30 tracks on it.
Yeah.
And it kind of spiraled, and then I think it all got a bit too much for Yoniden. I don't really know what happened there, but they I think they just wanted to pass on hand it over to someone, and because they realized there was something big, everyone was enjoying. It was a big thing. Didn't want it to stop, but they'd reached the limit. They put all of it out themselves, and having done it with a group of people helping, I know that it is a huge task. How they did it all by themselves, I have no idea. But anyway, yeah, by the end of about 2023 or something, they just handed over the keys to Axwax, actually, who took on like the logins for all the servers and the email accounts and everything. And then over a couple of months, I think I've written a very long blog post. You can go and read all the details about it. But over a couple of months, we set up, we tried a Matrix channel. That didn't really work. So then we decided, well, let's have an old school forum. So we set up this old school forum which we called the Bonk Board, obviously, where we do all of this sort of things. It's much more of a group kind of community effort now, with different people diving in and doing different pieces. So no one person has to kind of shoulder all the responsibility. And yeah, myself and Axe are admins of the board. We make sure it stays running properly and nobody's insulting people too much, that kind of thing. But it's pretty much otherwise it's just a community of people making music that may or may not be Bonkwave.
Okay. All right. Actually, that is probably one of the best descriptions. And also, I love the fact that it became a marketing sensation by not really trying for itself.
I think marketing sensation is putting it a little bit strongly, but yeah.
Just to help the story. I don't know. Come on. No, but I'm curious about you said you set up a matrix and then switched to a forum. I've always been very curious about matrix instances and the difference between them and forums. Why did you switch from that to a forum?
A few reasons, really. Matrix it's just a chat room, so it's quite difficult to compartmentalize different conversations about different things. If you get into a big conversation with a few people, it's all scrolled. Everything else that's gone before is scrolled way off the top, and it's quite difficult to read. So that that part of it wasn't working well. But also, Matrix is a bit quirky. Bits of it don't always work quite the way that you think they're going to work, and depending which client people were using, they were seeing different bits of functionality working well, and other people were seeing other bits of functionality working well or not working. So we were getting into a little bit of a problem where people were, we tried to use threads, for example, which only work in some clients and not in others. It was just getting a little bit cluttered and complicated to use. And somebody suggested, probably was actually suggested, why don't we just use an old school forum? And Axe went off and found this one that we use, which is Simple Machines Forum, and set up a test server. And then I actually set up the infrastructure we deployed it into. And that's where we went.
Okay. Yeah. And it's just funny because I use both, or I participate in both of them. And like on one side, the Ubuntu Studio support has recently switched to, they use Element, but they're using a similar sort of thing. And
Element is Matrix. That is Matrix. Yeah,
that is Matrix. And they, I enjoy the being able to chat, but then if I come back like a few days later to go, hey, this was where it happened. If I don't know what I'm looking for, it's gonna be like you feel like you got to just type in and start over again, or you have to hunt around for. It's always some drop down or some sort of menu hidden somewhere where the thing you're looking for is. But then also on the Linux audio forum, I enjoy that, but also sometimes it seems kind of cumbersome, and there's when you can see it, it's like, oh, there's so much reading. Everybody typed so much. Whereas in a chat one, everybody kind of tries to keep it succinct and conversational. So, but then that's where all the information is too, especially if you're trying to troubleshoot something. So I've been in both and I go back and forth. So I was curious what your opinion was on it. And those are also good opinions. It's one of those things where I don't think the debate will ever end. I think it'll be forum or Matrix.
Well, we have a Matrix. Well, I mean, the Bonkwave Matrix channel is actually still there. I think people have every now and then it gets posted in, but it doesn't get used very much. But we never actually deleted it. But I set up another one called Beyond Faircamp, where we discuss a few things, and that ticks over. We try and keep that light so that it doesn't get completely overwhelmed. But something kicks off and we have a conversation once a week or something on there about something interesting that's popped up. When Merlot first came on the scene, we had a good conversation about that. Those sorts of things. It's quite nice to just have somewhere to chat about that stuff that isn't necessarily so structured. But yeah.
Okay. And now another thing too that I found out about you and connected with you through an artist that I was talking to who turned me on to Faircamp. And you also were mentioned as a person that runs a Faircamp Webring. And I was like, Webrings? I remember Webrings. Tell me about this. And while the artist Mel Joanne told me about it, but said I should talk to you about it because you would clearly, of course, have more info because you were the person that does the Faircamp Webring. So tell me about the Faircamp Webring. Wow, that's hard to say.
The Webcamp Fairing, yeah. I mean, I think there's a few of us. Obviously, there's a sort of a growing little community of musicians on Mastodon that have come together, partly brought together because of Radio Free Fedi, which sorely missed. And partly came together through the Fedivision Song Contest, also sorely missed. But there's quite a few of us that chat about various different things. And I think there was a little bunch of us that all pretty much discovered Faircamp at the same time. So we set up some Faircamp sites, and the person behind Radio Free Fedi helped a few musicians set up their own Faircamp sites as well, set some up for them. So we had a few. And we got to talking about, well, this is great, but we've all just got our own little websites sitting on a server somewhere and no way to get to them. And then Mastodon being Mastodon, someone else in a completely separate conversation said, oh, anybody remember Webrings? I like Webrings. Whatever happened to them? And I just thought, you know what? That might be the option here. We were all talking about Faircamp. Why don't we just try and stick something on? So I had a quick look around at what software was out there and found this extremely simple one called Fairy Ring, which doesn't require any JavaScript or any software to run on the actual website page at all. It's just a link. You just have to put a link and then everything. It's just really simple. It's stupidly simple how it works. So I set that up on my own, and I invited a couple of other people, Futsal and Control.org, to join. And they were just like, oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, let's try it. And it was a bit of a joke to start with, like Webrings, who does Webrings, you know? And now we've got, I think, 75 members, 77 members of the Webbring, something like that.
Nice.
Just an attempt to join up all of these Faircamp sites that people have set up. And yeah, there's loads of Faircamp sites that aren't on the Webbring, but the ones that are on the Webbring, you know, there's a nice directory of them on the Webbring site. You can sort the directory by various different ways. And then if you go to any of these sites, on each of them, you can see a next or a previous link that takes you to the next or the previous site in the ring. And so you can just keep surfing on. If you don't like that particular artist, hit next, go to the next one. Maybe you like them, or you want to find some more, you just keep hitting next and you can cycle through. You know, it's very simple, very old school way of doing things. And the particular software that we use is really simple as well. Very low maintenance, very low overhead, very easy to install for the artists onto their sites. So
let's get into that too, because as a artist who finally, after discovering Faircamp, and then we also uploaded our own, or created our own server with a Faircamp page on it, and then of course quickly after that Simon released a new update for it, so now I got to do that. But that's the nature of using using software.
Don't tell anybody, but mine is still running version 0.15 or something from a long time ago. So,
nice.
yeah.
That's awesome.
I think I started on version 0.08 or something, and we're now on about 0.15.
Yeah.
But yeah, the actual, he's about to release 1.3, so if you're about to update, I would hold off. There's another one coming out in the next, well, soonish. So yeah.
Well, good, because I am being lazy and I haven't updated. Like, I thought I was safe when I was just like, oh, he just released 1.0. That means it'll only just be bug fixes until then. No, dude's actively like improving it every day, you know, being a good developer. And listen to me complaining about it. No, I love the work that he's doing. It's just one of those things where it's like, darn it, now I got to update again. Anyway, my point being is, now that I have this, how does one go about adding their Faircamp to this Webbring? What is the process for that?
Really simple, and it's documented in a few bullet points on the website. So basically, you just send me a personal message on Mastodon, say, this is my site, I've read the rules. There's some really simple rules that we put on there to make sure that we don't get any particularly nasty people on there and that people feel safe surfing the site. And you agree to put the links on your Faircamp site. I add you to your site to a list, which is the main website list, and you add the next and previous links onto your Faircamp site, and they're just URL links. There's some markup examples of how you can add them to your Faircamp config files on the website. There's some examples how to do it. It's really easy. Just cut and paste some code. The links are a standard Faircamp, a standard fairy ring link, and then you put your domain on the end, which is how it knows whether to go next or previous. So it's really simple. It's just a standard link, and then you replace the end with your domain, and then you're off and running.
And so does this also add, or is this you manually adding that to, you said you had a list of participating?
Yeah, so the whole thing is driven from a big text file, which is literally just a list of the domains.
Oh, okay.
And then there is some software which I found online. It's actually written in Rust, so I can't take any credit for that. It's an open source package called Fairy Ring, which reads that text file and serves up, processes the next or previous and figures out which site you should be going to in the list. And then I did actually add a function to the code that has a random, because I quite like the idea you could click on random and just go to any of them. So I added an additional, so it came with next and previous functions. I added a random function.
Kind of like how the blogs used to do, where you could do random blogs and there would be the little bar at the top going through the different blogs. Okay. Oh, speaking of that too, I noticed that for your blog, you use Write Freely. And this is just a personal question. How do you like it? I am very much into static websites, and I know it's a static website written in Go, but I've always been I'm just one of those, that's what I started out on, which is Jekyll. And I have yet to be swayed away from Jekyll. So, but I'm curious what you think of the Write Freely service.
So it's not a static, it's not properly static in the same way that sort of Jekyll or Hugo or Faircamp is. There's a running server component that you can talk to do the editing. I I like it because the editing's all done in Markdown, so you can build it somewhere else and just cut and paste it in, or you could. There is actually an editor that you can use in there if you want, although it's quite basic. It's just a text block.
Oh, so it really does have kind of like a back end for the creation.
Yeah, there is a back end that allows you to edit and manage the posts, which I quite like. Okay. So it's much simpler actually than setting up something like Jekyll. There's no moving part that you need to run.
Yeah, there's no YAML
it's more like a blog. I wanted something simple because I'm not much of a blogger or a poster, so it had to be something that was going to be straightforward. And I had dabbled in those static site generators. I think it wasn't Jekyll, it was the Hugo. I think I tried a couple of those sorts of things before, and I thought they're great, but they're not quite as simple as Faircamp in that you've still got to actually write the content, and then you've got to figure it out, and you can't view it or preview it while you're writing it. And I never quite got into it. So this had to be something really simple, and it had to be something that would just work and run freely. It's just a single executable file, very much like Fairy actually. It's a single executable file. You just stick on the machine, a little bit of Nginx config to wire it all up to serve it off the web, and then it just works. And it's technically federated as well, although I haven't found the federation works particularly well. At least my setup isn't. Maybe I've done something wrong with the setup. It doesn't seem to be federating properly, mine. But in theory, it's federated as well. So you can, your blog user is a perfectly valid user on the Fediverse as well. So yeah.
Question about that. So as far as things being federated, is it while I am currently very enthusiastic about it, my history is Creative Commons and open source, free and open use, remix and rebuild upon. Like that is where I come from. And that community has kind of changed because of the, oddly enough, advent of streaming, making music readily available. Suddenly downloading music and allowing people to remix and reuse wasn't a thing anymore. But discovering the federated sort of not genre, but just the people behind federated things. Like I was back when Identica was around, and it was sort of based off of that concept, the whole activity pub and all that thing. But when people say something is federated, my understanding is still very confused. I kind of see it like basically it's an RSS. It's something that just can be read and be repurposed in different platforms to do the same thing. I guess that's what I mean. Like when you're saying that the site or that Write Freely it says it's federated, but I'm always kind of like, how? I guess.
I mean, I'm probably not the right person to talk about this. I'm not an activity pub expert, but my understanding of it is, if you imagine you've got RSS, that's fine. You can subscribe to it, but you can't do much else. It's not very interactive.
Right.
Imagine if that RSS protocol also had the ability to reply to individual things that are on there, to favorite things that are on there, to repost things that are on there. And then I think you're getting closer to something that's activity pub. Mm-hmm. I'm speaking really loosely here, obviously, but
right, and that's the same thing too. It's like I have a brief understanding of it.
I think RSS is connected to things like Mastodon because Mastodon does expose your feeds as RSS, but I don't think it's actually using RSS under the hood. But the idea is that you could publish something using a whole different range of sites. So you could publish some music on Funkwell or Bandwagon. You can publish a microblog post on Mastodon. You could publish a picture on PixelFed. There's probably some others I've forgotten, but or you could publish a blog post on Write Freely. But from any Mastodon account, for example, I could subscribe to any of those, and then I get all of those things appearing in my feed. So I could subscribe to someone's Write Freely blog. I could subscribe to someone's Funkwell channel. I could subscribe to someone's PixelFed thing, and it would all come into my same feed. All of those things would come up, which I suppose is similar to having all of that in RSS and having it through an RSS reader. But not only do they all come up in my feed, I can interact with them, I can reply to them, I can favorite them, I can bookmark them, I can reblog or retweet or boost them so that other people can see them. So it's got that social aspect connected into it as well. Mm-hmm. And all of these sites completely interact with each other. So they're all, you don't have to join one specific one. You can join any of them and they'll interact and interconnect.
Well, and I get that, and that is my understanding of it. But this is where my problem was, and maybe this is what I was trying to say. I get that I can subscribe to, say, my Pixel Fed on Mastodon, or you can subscribe to a blog from Mastodon or things like that. But what I'm saying is, it seems difficult to figure out how. I mean, we say that's what it can be done, but if I were to try and subscribe to your Write Freely blog from Mastodon, I don't understand how I could do that. That's what I mean, is there's a disconnect there for me mentally to go, I understand that it can do it. I'm just like, but how does this go into that? You know what I mean?
My Write Freely instance has one user, which is me, and that user has a Fediverse identity attached to it. No, it's not. Write Freely is not the easiest thing to find out what that identity is, but I could give you that identity, which is at something, I can't remember what it is myself. I think it's at Keith at blog.key13.uk. It might be at Key13 at blog.key13. I can't remember. Yeah. It's one of those. If you just type that into the search engine in mastodon.social, it'll find it as an account, and so you can then subscribe to it. And then when I post things, you'll get them in your main feed.
Okay.
And you could boost them. If you reply to them, I probably won't ever see it, because I certainly haven't figured out how to see replies coming into Write Freely. There might be a way, but this is why I think my Write Freely instance isn't properly federating. I think I've got something wrong somewhere. It's not quite doing what I expect. Because I'm pretty sure I subscribe to my own Write Freely blog, and I never see my posts coming up in my feed, so I don't quite know. But that's in theory how it should work.
Yeah, because I know I figured out how to follow my Pixel. I mean, okay, I wasn't doing it to be arrogant and going, I only want to follow myself, but I followed my Pixel Fed account from my Mastodon, and I remember I set it up, or I figured out the way to do it. Going back now, I'm like, how the hell did I do that again? And then I kind of remembered it the way you said, is like you search for it, or you actually paste in the address into Mastodon, and then it finds it, all that. Yeah. But that was my point, is that I know that that's kind of what it does. And I feel like it's one of those things where I've only scratched the surface, but it also was not entirely clear. I enjoy that, though. Now, let me point out, what I'm saying here is the federated world is really something that's been scratching my itch lately. It's really been fulfilling my curiosity and my enthusiasm for technology and music and creativity the way that Creative Commons did back when I had first discovered that. So I really enjoy that. And there's a tech component to it. And there are people who are creative, but also create music based on their knowledge of different things they can do with technology, or how to use it for promoting music, creating Bonkwave, things like that, like using the community itself as something that really builds in a creative, open culture. And I do enjoy that. And that's why I was really happy to speak with you, speak with some of the guests I've had on previously, speak with some of the guests that are in upcoming episodes that I'm doing. So I've really been enjoying this. And I do appreciate the patience in my, I'm learning as I go along, knowledge of the federated world. But I also am really excited about it, even with the Faircamp thing and the Faircamp Webring. And one thing, as I was talking about that, so curious now, with the music you release, why don't you release it under Creative Commons? Have you ever considered that, or is there a reasoning behind that?
So I went through. So are you aware of a website called Flickr.com, which was briefly very, very popular? And I don't know when this would have been, late 2000s, I guess.
Yeah.
Late 2000s, early 2010s, I suppose, maybe, I don't know. And that was, what passed for, before Instagram came along, that was where you put your pictures up, and it was quite social. There were groups and things like that. And I dabble in photography. I'm not very good at it, but I dabble in photography. I used to put some photos up there, and I used to always put them up as Creative Commons non-commercial, so CC by NC.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was fine with that. I don't need to make money off them. I'm quite happy with people using them for various different things. If they are going to make money off them, then I'd like to take a cut. So I thought the NC bit sounded quite fine about that. Mm-hmm. And then I got into an argument with the picture editor at Wired magazine, because they'd used one of my pictures on one of their articles. And if they'd have just asked, I genuinely wouldn't have minded. But they were really pig-headed about it, and they were just like, we're editorial use, we can use your picture, it's fine. And I was thinking, no, you're a magazine,
they were claiming fair use
for that. That's not editorial use. That's, you're actually paying for some content. You'd normally pay somebody to put that content on there, and you take them a picture. Now, I really don't mind, but that's not how that license works. And I got into raging argument over email, and then eventually they went off and took the picture down and put another picture up there without any apology. But it kind of, I don't know, it sort of soured me a little bit on the Creative Commons thing. And actually, some of my music is, so my Bonkwave stuff is all actually under CC BY. So all of the stuff that is released, I have actually 2 identities that releases music on the Bonkwave compilations, and all of those are released as CC BY.
Okay.
My main music, I kind of keep all rights reserved just so that I've got some control over it, really. I'm always open to anybody using it for things, and people will know they've requested it for lots of different things, putting it on podcasts, putting it on radio stations, rebroadcasting. I'm remixing, I have no problem with any of that stuff. It's really just a mechanism of retaining some control. And yeah, I think about it every now and then as to, do I really want to keep doing that? Do I want to put it back go back to the CC BY and see, or I don't know.
Well,
I know it's something you feel very strongly about, and you're probably going to try and convince me one way or the other. But
no.
I've kind of been through that phase, and I have no issues either way. It's just where I am at the moment. I think that's where most of my stuff is.
I feel strongly about it, but I would never convince somebody to do something, one, they're uncomfortable with, and two, something that they just don't believe in. So while I'm for it, people have the right to do what they want with the things that they create. I would never go, you need to do things this way. That is, I do enjoy talking about it, and I do definitely go, this is why I do it. But seriously, I have no judgment, or like, I'm not going to convince you to do that. No. And rightfully so. I mean, I absolutely get that. There's actually a person I know who had a very, very similar, and it was even photography and through Flickr, very similar thing, but they were also a huge advocate in the Creative Commons community, and was like, you know what, we're going to use this as the example as to what you're supposed to do, rather than we have a general knowledge of what we think Creative Commons is, and we know that it says we can use it, which is what normally happens. It's kind of like the way radio stations go, oh, after 8, well, I don't know if this is the same over there, but after 8 o'clock, they have a thing called Blue Waters, where the FCC is a little bit looser on the music you can play, or if it has a swear word in it, you're not going to get fined for it. But other people will be like, we can do what we want after 8. Woo!
It's 9 o'clock here, and it's called the Watershed. But yeah, it's the same kind
of
thing.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes. It's a very similar thing where people just go, I kind of understand what it is, so I'm going to use that as my platform, but I'm not going to do the work. So yes. And the like with us, we put ours under share alike as well. So the argument being that if they were to use it, even if they used it improperly, it means that it's going to also be under that Creative Commons license because it's share alike. So what I can do is I can then take that and use what they made and make my own thing out of it. So it's kind of like you can mock it and reappropriate what they did. So that's why we use that. But yeah, it is the nature of the beast, where people will just misunderstand what it is and use it any way they see fit, because they go, oh, this is music you can use for free. No, that's royalty-free music. That's not Creative Commons. So
yeah,
I absolutely
that whole
get what you mean.
Royalty-free thing is very confusing to people, because people equate royalties with money. So that's like, oh, well, it's royalty-free, so it's free. It's fine.
Exactly.
It's not quite how it works, but yeah. I guess I just got tired of having those conversations, to be honest with you.
Oh yeah, no, I get you.
And yeah, I mean, I've also been through the same thing with software, because I've been through trying to use being on the commercial side. You have various different variants of the GPL and the Afro license that's been trying to stop service people providers from just nicking everybody's code and running it on the back end server without distributing it. Those sorts of things. So I've seen all of that, and I follow all of this. And as a commercial software engineer, I'm always very happy to use software that's been BSD or MIT licensed, because it's much easier to use, which is why when I do Creative Commons my stuff, I just thought, you know what, it's either Creative Commons or it's not. I'm going to go the whole hog, and when I do, it's like CC BY, so just make sure it's got my name on it somewhere.
Right.
Because you can get tied in the share alike. I love the principle behind the whole share alike and the non-commercial thing, but you get tied in knots with people trying to figure out what's actually non-commercial. It's really quite hard to nail down. There are some significant edge cases which, maybe that's commercial, maybe it's not. I'm not sure. and then share alike. Did you actually share it quite the same? I don't know. Those sorts of things. I think it's great when it works, but on the very rare occasions that it doesn't, it can be quite painful. So I think, you know, the stuff that I have put under CC, it's just CC by now. It's just like, okay, stick my name on it. Fine.
Yeah.
That's
No,
right.
I had there was a label out of Korea that very much misunderstood what Creative Commons was. And what they did is they went around going, okay, well, we're going to put this on our label, and now we're going to go around YouTube and send them cease and desist orders for using this music in their video, because now we own it because we put it on a record label. And I'm just like, that's not it at all. I don't even know where you got that concept from. So I had to do a whole hunt them down. And that's the problem with, in general, even in music, even if you don't do that and someone just uses your stuff, it's hard to fight a battle online anyway if somebody uses your stuff, no matter what license it's under. So, and even finding the people at first. So there you go. Anyway, we were here to talk about sharing music in Faircamp and all that kind of stuff. So let's end on that note. First, what I want to ask you before we leave is, what are some things you have coming up or things you'd like to tell people about that you have in the works?
So I've just, I don't know when this will go out, but as of recording, about 2 days ago, I released the biggest project I've ever done, which was to go back over, because it's been almost exactly 5 years since I ordered this NanoKey. So it was in March 2020. So March, it was meant to come out in March 2025, but I didn't get it out quite in time, so it came out in the beginning of April. But I went back over the last 5 years and picked out all the tracks that I thought were decent. I went back and, well, by my standards anyway, other people may vary, went back and tried to sort of remix them all. And I've never been the best music producer on the production side, and I certainly never wasn't when I started out. I didn't have a clue what I was doing when I first started. I don't really have much of a clue now, but I had less of a clue then. So went back, remixed, remastered everything. So it's like a 18-track compilation called Pretentious Incongruity, which came out on Friday, which coincided with Fair Trade Music Friday, the first new one of those. So yeah, that's I don't know what I'm going to do next after that. That was quite a lot of work. That's about 3 months work of remixing and remastering. So that's quite a lot of, for me, that's quite a lot of time. So
right, yeah. No, I heard it too, and it sounds great. I was listening to a lot of the new stuff that you put out and the remixes of those, and they sound fantastic.
Oh, thank you for that. I don't know if you're being nice or what, but yeah.
No, I'm not at all.
There's always some of these that I listen back and you just think, oh, I still haven't got that right. You know, Heretic.
Oh, for sure.
Heretic particularly, I can never get the bass and drums right on that. It just doesn't sound
really.
Right to
you
me,
don't think so?
Yeah. No,
I love what you did with that on there.
Okay,
that was the one that stood out to me the most, to tell you the truth. So I dug that. Okay, and now the Faircamp Friday, what is that? That now you were also mentioning something I don't know about.
So another thing that Axe started. I don't know why Axe and I end up working together quite a lot, but we do. We tend to bounce stuff off each other. But so Axe started this last year when Bandamp got bought out by Songtrader, and there was a lot of chat about whether they were still going to be a good company to do business with. They fired a bunch of people and they did some union busting. A lot of people got a little bit upset. I mean, I think from an artist's point of view, nothing's really changed that much. So probably in terms of just looking at revenue shares and those sorts of things, nothing's really changed there. But there was a time when people were quite wary of them, and perhaps rightly so. I don't know. Time might tell. But they stopped doing Bandcamp Fridays every month and they reduced them down last year. So Axe had this idea, well, hang on, why don't we do something that's like a Bandcamp Friday, but for music that's distributed on all these other sites, so Faircamp and Merlot and Jam.coop and people who just put their own music up on their own site with nothing else going on. And so he set up this website, which is really clever. So he posts a tweet on Mastodon, and you reply to that, and then the website shows the reply and shows all of the replies on the site. So every now and then on a Friday, he would post one of these, and everybody would put their latest release on there. And then now you've got an archive on the website that just shows all of these releases on there. And if you look at the website, there's archives going back He did loads of them last year, so there's about 20 or so of them in there with archives of all these releases that people have put up. It's a fantastic resource to go back and look at various people. So people were promoting other people's stuff, which is great. Have you seen this latest album by, Romeo Risha or Mel Joanne or Roberta Fedora, whatever. Great stuff going on there. And then people were promoting their own stuff. It was really good. But it kind of fizzled out around October, November time last year, because it's actually a really manual process. He just literally built the website, and then every time he posted the thing, he had to archive off the old one and manually move the file over into a directory, and then he had to take the IDs and get the code working so that it was pointing to the new post and not the old one and all that sort of stuff. So what I did a couple of weeks back was just automate all of that, write some little Python scripts that just literally they post the toot and they build the page and move everything else into the archive. Really simple stuff. It's only about 20 lines of code or something. It's not very much at all. So we thought we'd relaunch it. And so Friday just gone, we relaunched that. And now we've got a little script that will post once a month on the first Friday of the month. That is now Fair Trade Music Friday. And it posts the toot. If you reply to the toot, your reply gets onto the website. And you can go to the website and see what everybody else is promoting that week.
And is it really just an embedded Mastodon post that on the website?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's an embedded post with the replies. So yeah, it uses someone else's script. I forget the name of the guy who wrote the script. It's just a piece of JavaScript that's clever enough to go off and find the replies to the post.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. That's awesome.
And I think your release was one of the ones that was mentioned on this week's one. So I think your latest release was on there. Yeah. I think somebody plugged it there. So
I got to go look for it so I can help share that, even though it's not Friday anymore. But no, that's really cool. All right. And then if people wanted to check out more of your stuff, where could they go do that?
Most of the sites that we've been talking about, but I think everything's linked off Key13.uk. So that's my main website. You can go there and find out everything. I've got a Bandcamp site, I've got Nello, I've got Bandwagon, which means that hopefully some of the new material that's on Pretentious Incongruity should end up getting played on the Indie Beat Radio, which would be nice. So you could listen to them. Or there's my own Faircamp site, which is at music.key13.uk, which also has most of the same stuff and a few extra bits that aren't anywhere else. I have a SoundCloud, which is the original SoundCloud I set up when I started, and that is somewhere I put demos and all kinds. There's all sorts of random stuff on there that's not properly mixed or mastered or anything. But yeah, if you want to hear it like it is when it first comes off the keyboard, then that's the place to look there. If you can bear to go to SoundCloud. I know people can't bear to go to SoundCloud, but it's there. So yeah.
After I had to create a third account because I ran out of room, I kind of gave up on SoundCloud.
Yeah, I must admit I paid them some money at some point, which means they keep taking money from me. I might have to review that at some point, but yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for talking with me today. It was great meeting you.
Yeah, it was lovely. Nice chat.